I built that house with my own 2 hands when I was 34. Back then, it was just me, my wife Helen, and a big dream of growing old surrounded by family. Every corner of that house held memories. The porch where Helen used to drink her morning tea, the stairs where my son Ryan scraped his knees a dozen times, the kitchen where birthday cakes were baked, including his first one. When Helen passed, the silence inside those walls grew louder. For a while, it was unbearable. So when Ryan and his wife Vanessa said they were struggling financially and needed a place to stay, just for a while, I didn't hesitate. I welcomed them in. I told them, "This is your home too now." That was 5 years ago. They moved in with their little girl, Emma, a sweet soul with her mother's eyes but none of her coldness. She would run into my arms every morning, calling me Grampy, and I lived for that. At first, it really did feel like a family again. Dinner at the table. Laughter. Noise. Life. But slowly, things changed. It started with small things. Vanessa began reorganizing my kitchen, moving everything around. Ryan began acting like he was the man of the house, making decisions without asking. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just settling in. Young people need space. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Then I started being left out of conversations. I'd walk into the living room, and the TV would go quiet. Or I'd hear my name, followed by silence. Vanessa started criticizing everything I did. "Why do you always leave your boots there? Do you really need the volume that loud? Emma doesn't need stories about the old days, Dad." I became a guest in my own home. One night, I overheard Vanessa telling Ryan that having an old man sulking around is depressing. She didn't know I was still in the hallway, barely breathing. Ryan didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. But it wasn't until a rainy Thursday morning that I truly realized what I had become. Ryan knocked on my bedroom door, my bedroom, and said they needed to talk. He and Vanessa had discussed it and thought maybe it would be best if I took the shed out back. "Just for a while," he said, "until we finish fixing up the spare room for Emma's play area." I didn't speak. I just nodded. My heart was pounding, not from anger, but from shame. That night, I moved my clothes into a small bag. The shed was damp. It smelled of oil and rust. There was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, flickering like it wasn't sure it wanted to keep shining. I set up a cot, an old chair, and placed my books on a shelf made of crates. No one came to check on me. Not Ryan. Not Vanessa. Only Emma, once, snuck out in her socks to give me a cookie she had hidden from dessert. She didn't say anything. Just hugged me tight and ran back inside. I told myself I could endure it. That I was old, and maybe this was just how things go. Parents become burdens, right? Maybe this was normal. Maybe I just had to get used to it. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't living in my house anymore. I was surviving on the edge of it. And one day, one final day, that edge would vanish completely. The week leading up to Ryan's birthday was cold, the kind of gray winter that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I had circled the date on a calendar pinned above my makeshift cot in the shed, February 10th. His 38th birthday. Despite everything, the shed, the silence, the sideways glances, I still wanted to give him something. Maybe some part of me believed that a kind gesture might thaw whatever ice had taken root in his heart. I spent days sanding and polishing an old wooden box I'd been working on, a keepsake chest. I carved his initials on the lid, stained it with a dark walnut finish, and lined the inside with blue velvet. Inside, I placed a few photos from his childhood, ones he'd forgotten, and a handwritten letter. It simply said, "No matter what, I'm proud of the man you became. Love, Dad." I wrapped the box in brown paper and tied it with twine. On the morning of his birthday, I cleaned myself up as best I could. Shaved. Combed what little hair I had left. Wore my best flannel shirt and a wool sweater Helen had knit me years ago. It still smelled faintly like cedar and warmth. As I approached the house, I could already hear the voices, laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. The living room lights glowed golden through the windows. They were having a party. A real one. Friends, co-workers, the whole show. And I hadn't been told. I hadn't been invited. I hesitated on the steps. My hands trembled slightly as I knocked on the door. Emma opened it. Her face lit up, but then quickly dimmed. "Hi, Grampy," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder nervously. "Come in quick." I stepped inside, and the air hit me like a wall, the smell of food, perfume, and something else. Tension. The music lowered as I entered. Vanessa saw me first. Her smile froze on her face. "Oh," she said, tight-lipped. "You made it." Ryan walked in from the kitchen, holding a drink. His eyes landed on me. No smile. Just disappointment. "What are you doing here, Dad?" The room went still. Conversations died mid-sentence. I held out the box. "I made this for you," I said. "Happy birthday, son." He didn't take it. Instead, he took a long sip from his glass and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know what I'd really like for my birthday? For you to stop showing up. Just stop pretending like we're something we're not." People shifted awkwardly. Vanessa gave a little laugh, not from humor, but to cover the silence. I kept standing there, arm outstretched, holding the gift like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My mouth went dry. Ryan didn't stop. "Honestly, Dad, ever since Mom died, you've just been hanging around, expecting things to be the way they were. But they're not. This isn't your house anymore. You live out back. We've all moved on. Maybe you should too." The gift fell from my hands. I didn't mean to drop it, but my fingers just let go. The box hit the floor with a dull thud. Emma looked like she was about to cry. I slowly bent down, picked it up, and said softly, "I understand." And I left. I walked back to the shed, slower than usual, not because I was tired, but because my body refused to move faster. The cold air bit at my cheeks, and I didn't brush away the tears this time. I let them freeze on my skin. That night, I didn't light the small heater in the shed. I lay there in the darkness, the gift box beside me, still unopened, still unloved. And as I stared at the ceiling, something inside me shifted. Something that had been asleep for too long finally woke up. I would not beg to be seen anymore. I would not wait for warmth in a house that had gone cold. If they wanted me gone, truly gone, then I would give them exactly what they asked for. But not the way they expected. The next morning, the house looked exactly the same from the outside. Clean lawn, trimmed hedges, smoke from the chimney curling peacefully into the gray sky. A picture of order. A home. But I knew what it really was now. A shell. A place that once held my life, and now just tolerated my existence. I sat on the cot in the shed, the wooden box resting on my lap. My hands traced the grooves of the carved initials. R.M. Ryan Michael. I remembered the day I gave him that middle name, after my own father. I remembered holding him in my arms for the first time, promising I'd always protect him. I wondered what he would name his son, if he ever had one, and whether he'd carry that same pride, or the same cruelty. That morning, I made no coffee. I made no breakfast. Instead, I stood up, stretched my sore back, and opened the small notebook I kept in the top drawer, the one labeled, "Just in case." It held bank account information, insurance policies, passwords, Helen's pension details, the deed to the house, everything. I turned to a clean page and began to write. To Mr. Harris, attorney at law. Effective immediately, I would like to begin the process of legally transferring all property and financial accounts away from the current structure. I no longer wish my son, Ryan M. Bennett, to be listed as a beneficiary on any legal document tied to my estate. Please advise on full removal. Sincerely, Edward J. Bennett. That was the first letter. Then I called a man I knew from town, someone who had once offered to buy my house years ago, before Ryan moved in. He still wanted it. Full price, No questions, he said. We shook hands the next day. I signed the first papers by candlelight in the shed, my breath visible in the air. No one noticed I was gone all afternoon. No one asked. That same week, I opened a private bank account, withdrew every cent I had saved over 40 years, and moved the funds. I set up a P.O. box in a nearby town under a different name. E.J. Thomas. Helen's maiden name. My lawyer worked quickly. He owed me that. I'd helped his father build their porch when I was a carpenter. Within 10 days, my name was the only one on every asset again. Ryan was removed without notice. No warning. No chance to fight it. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I just wanted my dignity back. That Friday, I waited until the house was empty. Ryan and Vanessa had taken Emma to some school play. I walked in, quietly, and packed a single suitcase. A few clothes. A photo of Helen. The gift box I made. The rest, I left. In the kitchen, I left a note. You got what you wanted. I'm gone, Dad. No signature. No return address. I walked out the front door one last time, not hunched, not defeated, but standing tall. I didn't look back. The next 2 weeks were a blur of moving boxes, paperwork, legal filings. I rented a modest one-story home 2 hours away, small but clean, with a view of the water. The landlord was an older woman named June. She smiled when I told her I liked quiet. Well, she said, you'll get plenty of that here. I bought a second-hand armchair, a table, a coffee pot. I slept the first night on the floor, and it felt better than any night in the shed. The silence in this new place didn't echo, it comforted. I didn't tell anyone where I'd gone. No friends. No neighbors. And certainly not Ryan. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. That feeling would come later, not from revenge, but from something purer, something deeper. Because even though I had vanished, one person hadn't forgotten me. And that was where the real story would begin. My new life was quiet. There were no footsteps above me, no angry whispers through the walls, no slamming cabinet doors. Just the slow hum of the wind coming in from the water, the soft creak of my porch chair, and the occasional seagull reminding me the world was still moving. Every morning I'd wake early, not because someone knocked on my door or because my back ached on the shed floor, but because I wanted to. I'd brew a small pot of coffee, sit by the window, and watch the boats. That little harbor town had a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. People said, "Good morning," and meant it. No one looked at me like I was in the way. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving in someone else's life. I was living my own. I started volunteering at a local woodworking shop that trained teenagers in basic carpentry. I showed them how to shape dovetail joints, sand pine without splitting it, oil a handle until it shone like glass. The kids called me Mr. Ed, and I didn't correct them. It felt nice, like I still had something to give. But even in that peace, there was an ache I carried quietly. Emma. I didn't expect Ryan or Vanessa to come looking for me. And they didn't. But every night I wondered if Emma asked where I was. If she remembered the bedtime stories I used to tell, the cinnamon pancakes I'd make when she had a bad day. If she even knew I hadn't just left. I'd been pushed. I didn't dare reach out. I'd promised myself I wouldn't chase people who asked me to disappear. And then, 2 months after I'd moved in, it came, a letter. A small white envelope with shaky handwriting and a crooked stamp. It was addressed to Mr. E.J. Thomas, my alias, but below it, scrawled in faint pencil, were the words, "Grandpa, I think this is you." I sat down hard on the porch step, heart racing like I'd run a mile. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a sheet of lined notebook paper, folded twice, written in purple ink. "Dear Grandpa, Daddy says you left because you didn't like us anymore. But I don't believe him. You were my best friend. You made me pancakes with chocolate chips and taught me how to make birdhouses. You never yelled. You always listened. I don't know where you went, but I hope you're safe. If this is you, can you please write me back? You can just say yes or no, I won't tell anyone. Love. Emma. I read it 3 times, then held it to my chest like it was gold. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Seen. Truly seen. She remembered me. Not as a burden. Not as someone in the way. But as a grandfather, her grandfather. I didn't wait a day. I wrote back immediately. Dear Emma. Yes. This is me. And I have missed you every single day. Let's keep this just between us, okay? For now. Love always. Grandpa. I posted it with a stamp I had saved for bills, and for the next week, I checked the mailbox every morning like a boy waiting for a birthday card. And sure enough, it came again. Her next letter was longer. She told me about school, how she didn't like her new math teacher, how Vanessa made her eat vegetables that were boiled and gross, and how sometimes she dreamed about us living in a treehouse far away from everyone. I laughed aloud when I read that. We wrote each other every week. Sometimes more. I told her stories about my small town, drew her little maps of where the seagulls nested, described the old man who sold roasted peanuts outside the hardware store. She sent me drawings, a squirrel with a cane, a cat wearing glasses, a stick figure labeled you, with a beard and giant hands. I pinned them all up on the wall beside my bed. Through those letters, something unexpected happened. I began healing. Not just from the pain of what Ryan had done, but from the lie I'd started to believe, that I didn't matter anymore. Emma reminded me I did. And slowly, I began to remember who I was. Not just a father who had been cast out, but a grandfather who had not been forgotten. After I left, I imagined the house might finally feel perfect to Ryan and Vanessa. They had what they wanted, didn't they? A big, paid-off home. No old man in the way. No one interrupting conversations or reminding them of who paid the bills. Silence, control, and space. All theirs. But silence can rot a house just as fast as termites. Through Emma's letters, I learned more than I expected. She never complained directly. She was gentle, cautious, but kids have a way of letting the truth slip through the cracks. Dad's always working late now. Mom says he's stressed. They argue in the kitchen, but I'm not supposed to hear. Mom threw the picture you painted me. I taped it back together. I held that last letter for hours before putting it down. I hadn't realized that, in my absence, the balance I held, quiet, aging but steady, had been the last thing keeping that house from tipping into chaos. Without someone to judge them silently, maybe they thought they'd feel freer. But the truth is, people who need control rarely find peace once they have it. Vanessa, I could imagine, took over. The kind of control that suffocates rather than stabilizes. She'd never liked sharing attention, especially not with someone like me. Someone who reminded her that everything in that house wasn't earned by her, but given. And Ryan, my son. The man I raised to be better. The man who once cried on my shoulder when his dog died, who used to hold Helen's hand when we crossed streets. He'd vanished into someone else. Emma's letters got shorter for a while. I worried something had happened. Then one arrived, thicker than usual, 3 pages long, each word written carefully, like she was scared the paper might shatter. Grandpa, something is wrong. She told me about the silence at dinner. How Ryan barely looked up from his phone. How Vanessa snapped at her for leaving her room too often. How no one mentioned me anymore. Not once. Not even to lie. But Emma still remembered. She remembered everything. I miss you. I miss how you listened. Dad doesn't really listen. He just waits for me to finish talking. And Mom just says I'm being dramatic. Then came the question I'd been dreading. Why did you really leave? Did you stop loving me? I read that one line a dozen times. My hand shook as I picked up my pen. Dear Emma, I left because I was no longer welcome. But I never, not for a second, stopped loving you. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. They confuse pride with strength. But you are the reason I smile every morning. You are the best part of me that still lives in that house. And no matter what happens, I will always be here. Love forever. Grandpa. I sealed the envelope and mailed it that same hour. Something was building. I could feel it. Emma's world was shifting. She was no longer just a child stuck between parents and a grandfather. She was waking up to the reality of what had happened. And once that truth takes root in a child's heart, it grows fast. The next letter proved it. Grandpa, I think they lied to me. I think they made you leave. That sentence struck harder than anything Ryan ever said to me. Emma wasn't just figuring it out. She was standing up. The next envelope from Emma arrived with a single sheet inside. No drawings, no rambling stories about school. Just one sentence. I asked Dad why you left, and he got really, really quiet. I could almost picture it. The kitchen, Emma at the table with her juice box, her little brow furrowed, her voice calm but certain. Why did Grandpa really leave? And Ryan, caught off guard, looking up from his phone, blinking slowly, realizing he couldn't dodge anymore. Emma's next letter filled in the blanks. He said you were tired. That you wanted to go live somewhere peaceful. I asked why you didn't say goodbye. He said you left a note. She pressed him. She asked why she couldn't visit me. Why they didn't have an address. Why no one ever said my name anymore. Then he got mad, she wrote. He didn't yell. But he said, enough with the questions. He looked nervous. And that's when I knew. The cracks had started. Ryan had built a version of the truth in that house. A lie wrapped in silence, held together by shame. But lies are like old pipes. One good question and they burst. Emma's innocence had become my justice. In the days that followed, I imagined how it unfolded. Ryan pacing the living room late at night, rubbing his temples. Vanessa accusing him, I told you we should have just cut her off completely. You let her write those letters. Ryan replying, she's a kid, what was I supposed to do? And Emma, alone in her room, clutching my last letter like it was oxygen. That house, the one I had built for warmth and laughter, was no longer peaceful. It was a war of quiet stares and sealed lips. Emma's next letter said everything. I think he's scared I'll want to leave too. He told me you manipulated me. But you didn't. I remember how you made me feel. That's not manipulation. That's love. I had never been prouder. But I also knew things were about to get worse. For her. Kids who question lies become dangerous in households ruled by ego. And Ryan. He was still my son, but I didn't recognize what he'd become. The next week, no letter came. I waited. 2 days. Then 5. Nothing. I told myself maybe she was busy, or maybe Vanessa had found the letters and taken them. But a part of me knew. Something had changed. And then, finally, a small envelope arrived. Handwritten again, but this time shaky. The ink smeared. Grandpa. I'm sorry I didn't write sooner. Mom said I'm not allowed to send letters anymore. She found my drawings in the back of my closet. She said I'm being dramatic and obsessed with you. She said you don't care about us, that you're trying to make me hate them. But I know it's not true. I sat at my small kitchen table, holding that letter, fists clenched. She was being punished for remembering me. That was the last straw. They could lie about me. They could erase my name from dinner conversations. But they had no right to take me away from the only person who ever truly saw me. I walked to the drawer by the phone, opened the worn envelope I'd tucked away for months, the one with Ryan's address written in a script Helen had once used on holiday cards. And I started writing. Not to Emma. To him. I sat at my table long after the sun had dipped below the horizon, the kitchen bathed in the dull amber light of a single lamp. The house around me was quiet, the kind of silence I once feared in the shed. But here, it felt different. This silence wasn't a cage. It was choice. In front of me, a blank page. A pen. And everything I'd swallowed for over a year. I didn't rehearse the words. I let them come naturally. Ryan. I know you never expected to hear from me again. I imagine, in your mind, I've faded, like an old photo buried in the attic. That's fine. You can think of me however you want. But there's something you need to hear, and I'm going to say it just once. You didn't ask me to leave. You pushed me out. Slowly, quietly, with every dismissive glance, every cold shoulder, every time you let your wife belittle me in my own kitchen while you stayed silent. You might tell yourself you didn't know what was happening. That it wasn't really that bad. But the moment you suggested I move into the shed, like a forgotten dog, you made a choice. You just lacked the courage to admit it. And on your birthday, when you told me that what you wanted most was for me to disappear, you made sure I would never forget that choice. I hope the party was worth it. Because now you're left with the house, the bills, the silence, and a daughter who's beginning to see the truth you tried so hard to hide. Emma wrote me, over and over again. With honesty, with heart, with more maturity than I've seen in you in years. She remembers me. Not the version you painted, bitter and unwanted. She remembers the man who sat through her tea parties, who bandaged scraped knees, who made pancakes shaped like hearts. She remembers the man you used to call Dad. You want control. You have it. You won. But don't ever think for a second that I left because I was weak. I left because I still had self-respect. And I wasn't about to let the last years of my life be spent waiting for permission to exist. I want nothing from you. No apology. No explanation. But you better understand this. If you come between Emma and me again, if you try to rip her letters, or poison her with more silence, then I will make sure she knows everything. Not out of vengeance, but because the truth matters. Even if it comes too late for you. I don't hate you, Ryan. I'm simply done protecting you. Dad. I folded the letter, sealed it, and mailed it the next morning. No return address. He didn't deserve to know where I lived. But I made sure it arrived, hand-delivered through a legal courier. A letter you have to sign for. Something that can't be ignored. Something that sits with you. 2 days later, I got Emma's next letter. It was short. I don't know what you said to Dad, but he cried. I've never seen him cry. And then, he told me you didn't leave because you stopped loving us. He said he messed everything up. There was no victory in that. Only the quiet relief of finally being seen for the first time. Not by Emma, who always saw me, but by the son who had forgotten how to look. The next letter from Emma came in a blue envelope. It smelled faintly like lavender, the kind that Helen used to put in her drawers. I held it for a moment before opening it, not out of hesitation, but out of something deeper, reverence. Inside, her handwriting was steady, but her words were heavier. Grandpa. Daddy's different. He's quieter now. Not the angry kind of quiet, but the tired kind. He doesn't argue with Mom as much. And 2 nights ago, I heard him say your name. That line stopped me. Not Dad. Not the old man. But Grandpa. He said he didn't know how to fix what he broke. I asked him if I could write you again, but this time, not just letters. I want to see you. I lowered the letter to the table and looked out the window. The sea breeze was soft that day. The sky cloudless. She wanted to come. She wanted to see me, not just read my words. Not just imagine me. But sit across from me again, like before. The thought scared me. Not because I didn't want it, but because some part of me feared it wouldn't happen. That Ryan would shut it down. That Vanessa would slam the final door. But Emma had grown. Her words were braver now. She wasn't just a little girl asking for permission, she was demanding truth. I told Dad if he says no, I'll run away. I know that's dramatic, but I meant it. I want to see you before I get too big. before you get too old. I miss your eyes. I miss how you listen. That evening, I didn't write back immediately. Instead, I sat with the letter on my chest and closed my eyes. I pictured her, 11 now, older, stronger. Maybe with a few freckles Helen would have adored. Maybe with her mother's hair, but not her mother's coldness. And I whispered, soon. What I didn't know, until much later, was what happened that night in Ryan's house. Emma stood in the doorway of the living room, holding my letter like a badge. I want to go see Grandpa. Ryan looked up from his laptop, blinking slowly. Vanessa, ever the first to interrupt, cut in. Absolutely not. That man. But Emma raised her voice. For the first time in her life, she interrupted her mother. He's not that man. He's my grandfather. He never yelled at me. He never lied to me. And he never treated me like I didn't matter. Vanessa's mouth hung open for a beat. Ryan set his laptop aside, rubbed his face. Emma. She stepped closer. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. Did you lie to me? The question hung in the room like thunder. Ryan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Emma just nodded. That's what I thought. And with that, she left the room, not storming, not slamming doors. Just gone. Upstairs, she pulled a suitcase from the closet. Quietly, calmly, she started packing. Downstairs, Ryan stared at the wall. Vanessa whispered something harsh, but he didn't respond. Because for the first time, the silence wasn't between them and me. It was between him and himself. The next morning, Ryan knocked on Emma's door. I'll take you, he said softly. We'll visit him. Just you and me. Emma looked up. Just us. He nodded. Yeah, just us. And for the first time since I'd left, they made a plan not to erase me, but to find me. It was a Sunday morning. I had just come back from the harbor with a fresh loaf of bread tucked under my arm and a small bag of apples from the old woman at the farmer's stall. The air was cool, salty, and unusually still. I remember thinking how peaceful it all was, how small my life had become, and how oddly satisfying that felt. I unlocked the front door of my little house and stepped into the familiar smell of wood polish and coffee. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I heard it, a sound that froze me in place. Knock. Knock. Not the polite rattle of the postman. Not the quick tap of a neighbor dropping off mail. It was deliberate. Slow. Alive with weight. I turned toward the door, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt since the day I walked out of my old home. I opened it. And there she was. Emma. Taller than I remembered, hair longer, but the same light in her eyes. That soft spark I used to see when she'd ask me about the stars or dinosaurs or why grown-ups sighed so much. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. She just walked forward, wrapped her arms around me, and pressed her cheek into my chest like she used to. I knew you'd still smell like sawdust, she whispered. My hands trembled as I held her. You got tall, I said softly. You got smaller, she smiled. We both laughed, a laugh that cracked the wall between past and present. Behind her, I finally saw him. Ryan. Standing a few feet back, hands in his pockets, looking like a boy forced to face the principal. His shoulders were hunched. His eyes didn't meet mine. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. Emma turned around. Dad said he'd wait in the car. Ryan started to speak, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, but the words caught in his throat. He gave a slow, uncertain nod, then turned and walked back down the steps. And just like that, it was just me and her. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured her some juice, sliced an apple, and cut a thick piece of the still warm bread. She ate in small bites, like she was trying to make it last. I thought maybe you'd be mad, she said. I shook my head. Never at you. She looked around. It's small. Yeah, I smiled. But it's mine. I like it, she said, chewing. It smells like you. And coffee. We talked for an hour. Maybe more. She told me about school, how she hated gym class but loved history. How her new teacher wore weird socks with cats on them. How Vanessa had stopped bringing up my name after the fight. How Ryan had been quieter lately. Not better, not worse. Just quieter. He doesn't yell. But he doesn't laugh either, she said. I nodded slowly. He's trying to figure out what he lost. She looked up. Do you think he'll ever say sorry? I thought about that. Some people say sorry with words. Others just show up at your door. She smiled. He did both. We sat in silence after that. But it wasn't empty. It was full of everything we didn't have to say anymore. Before she left, she asked if she could see my workshop, the little shed I'd built behind the cottage. Inside, she found a half-finished birdhouse on the bench. Still making these? She asked. For you, I said, smiling. She picked up a paintbrush. Can I help? We spent the next 20 minutes painting the roof blue, the sides soft yellow. I want to come back, she said. I nodded. Any time. She hugged me again before she left. Tighter this time. And then, just before she stepped outside, she turned and asked, Can he come next time too? I didn't answer right away. But I looked out the window, saw Ryan sitting in the driver's seat of his car, staring at the wheel. Not checking his phone. Not fidgeting. Just sitting. Waiting. Maybe he was learning patience. Maybe he wasn't ready. But maybe, neither was I. So I said, Next time we'll see. Emma smiled. That's not a no. No, I said. It's not. She closed the door gently behind her, and I stood in the doorway, watching the car pull away. My chest was tight. My eyes were wet. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The envelope was plain. No return address. No decorations. Just my name, handwritten in the same rushed scrawl I used to see on crumpled school permission slips and birthday cards he forgot to buy until the day of. I recognized it instantly. Ryan. I stood at the table for several long seconds, turning the envelope over in my hands. Then I sat down and opened it. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was messier than Emma's, uneven, like the pen had been picked up and set down again too many times. There were no greetings. No, dear Dad. Just this. I don't know how to write this. Not because I don't have things to say, but because I don't know if any of them matter anymore. I've started this letter maybe 10 times. I kept thinking, what's the point? You probably don't want to hear from me. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But I saw the way Emma looked after we left your house. I haven't seen her that happy since Mom died. And it hit me. That was you. That peace she carried, that lightness, it wasn't from me. It was from sitting in your kitchen. From hearing your laugh. From you remembering how she likes her juice cold and her bread without crust. And that's when I realized what I did. I didn't just lose you. I stole you from her. All this time, I told myself I had good reasons. That the house was too crowded. That you were set in your ways. That Vanessa needed her space. That you and I were too different. But the truth? I didn't like who I was when you were around. Because when you were there, I couldn't pretend I was doing everything right. You saw through me. You always did. And that scared me. So I pushed you out, called it a compromise, and convinced myself that you wanted it. And on my birthday, when I said those words, I just want you gone. I thought I'd feel free. But instead, everything went quiet. And it's never been loud since. Emma's the one who woke me up. Every time she talked about you, with so much joy, so much love, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Shame. Not guilt. Not embarrassment. Shame. Because I didn't lose my father. I abandoned him. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't expect it. I just wanted you to know I remember, too. I remember when I had the flu and you sat up with me all night. I remember how you taught me to tie a tie 3 times before my first school dance. I remember the way Mom used to smile when you'd sneak me candy behind her back. And I remember the look on your face the day I stopped calling you Dad and started calling you him. I don't deserve a second chance. But I want to try. Even if it's just from the driveway. Even if I never set foot in your house again. I'm sorry, Ryan. I set the letter down slowly, folding it once, then again, like something sacred. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the wooden grain of my table, listening to the wind scratch at the windowpane like it had something to say too. Was it too late? Maybe. But maybe not. Some cracks, when deep enough, don't close cleanly. But they let the light in. I didn't write back immediately. I kept Ryan's letter on the small table by the window, weighed down by the same smooth stone Emma once gave me from the beach. I'd glance at it every morning while sipping coffee. Sometimes I'd unfold it, read a paragraph, fold it again, and just sit. I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't healed either. There are wounds that don't bleed but keep aching, like phantom pain from a limb long lost. Still, I wrote back. A letter not of punishment or pity. A letter from a father who had been broken, but never fully gone. Ryan, I read your letter more than once. The first time, I didn't trust it. The second time, I started to feel it. The third time, I believed it. You say you don't know if your words matter anymore. They do. They're late, yes. But sometimes truth takes the long road. I won't pretend things can go back to how they were. We can't undo what was done. There's no rewinding to birthday dinners, or fixing the echo that filled my shed after you sent me out of my own house. But I'm still here. And if there's still something in you worth rebuilding, then I'm willing to sit across a table and see what's left. I don't need an apology every time we speak. I don't need you to be someone you're not. I just need honesty and presence. Not grand gestures. Not fixes. Just presence. You can come by. I'll put an extra chair out on the porch. No conditions. If you come empty-handed, come anyway. If you come scared, come anyway. If you come with nothing but a silence that wants to be filled, come anyway. I won't pretend everything's fine. But I'm not keeping the door locked either. You say you want to try. Then try. But do it as a man who knows what he broke, not as one hoping to forget. I'll be out back in the afternoons, sanding the railing. Emma says the blue paint is chipping. Bring your hands. I could use the help. Dad. I folded the letter and drove into town myself to send it. No courier. No signature required. Just ink, paper, and the possibility of one more honest moment between us. When I dropped it in the mailbox, I stood there for a while, watching the slot as if something might come back out. Of course, nothing did. But something inside me shifted. Maybe not forgiveness. But the weight of resentment began to loosen, like old bark peeling off a tree. Later that week, I got a text from Emma. Just a photo. Ryan, sitting on the front steps of my house, holding a paintbrush in one hand, the other resting awkwardly on the porch rail. His shirt was stained. His face, tired. But beside him, a second chair. Empty. Waiting. She captioned it simply. We're both coming next Sunday. Save us some juice and bread. And so I did. 2 glasses. 3 chairs. And one story, finally being rewritten, not erased. The sun was just beginning to warm the wood of the porch when I heard the car. It was an old sedan, the kind Ryan never used to drive. Not flashy. Not polished. It made a soft clunk when the engine stopped. That sound alone made me smile. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was just arriving. I stood on the steps, cloth in one hand, coffee mug in the other. The breeze off the water moved slow and steady, the way I'd learned to breathe again. Emma jumped out first. She didn't run this time. She walked straight to me and handed me a paper bag. "Mom made you banana bread," she said. Then, after a pause, "I checked for poison." We both laughed, and behind her, Ryan smiled too. It wasn't big. It wasn't forced. It was real. "Morning," he said, his hands in his pockets. "Morning," I answered. We stood there for a beat, not awkward, just quiet. Then I stepped aside. "Hope you brought your arms. Railing's not gonna fix itself." "I brought a sander," he said. "And a peace offering." He held up a thermos. "Coffee. The good kind." I nodded. "You remembered." We got to work slowly. Emma sat on the steps, humming something under her breath as Ryan and I cleaned the railing. Paint dust floated in the sunlight like memory. Old, weightless, impossible to catch. For the first 20 minutes, we barely spoke. Just the sound of the sander, a few comments about angles and splinters. But in that silence, something else moved. Understanding. Familiarity. At one point, Ryan paused and wiped his forehead. "You built this porch, right?" he asked. "Twice," I said. "Storm knocked it down in '97. You were what, 12? He laughed. "Yeah. I remember. I dropped your hammer into the flower bed. Never told you." I smirked. "Found it a year later. Rusted. Still works." He chuckled. "That's kind of how I feel right now." That was the first thing he said that cut through everything. No metaphor needed. Just truth, tucked in a laugh. Emma stood and came over with lemonade. "You two sound like humans." "Progress." She handed us glasses and sat between us on the bench. Her feet dangled, not quite touching the ground. "You gonna tell him about the school play?" Ryan asked her. Emma grinned. "Not yet. I'm waiting to see if he survives this much talking." I raised an eyebrow. "Try me." So she told me. About the part she got. How she didn't want to sing but did it anyway. How the teacher said she had a grandfatherly voice during narration and she was secretly proud. "You inherited that from me," I said. Emma beamed. "I know." The afternoon stretched on. We didn't talk about the past. Not directly. Not yet. But it was there, in the pauses. In the way Ryan let me correct his sanding technique. In the way I offered him the last slice of banana bread. The little things were louder than any apology. Eventually, Ryan stood, dusted off his jeans. "I should get her home." "Homework." Emma groaned. "It's Sunday." "You said that last Sunday." "Because it's always true." They turned toward the car, but Ryan paused. I was gonna call next week," he said. "You just did," I answered. He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. Then, very softly, "Thanks for letting me try." I didn't say anything. I just gave him a slow nod, not as a father granting permission, but as a man recognizing another who finally showed up. Emma waved from the passenger seat. And then they were gone. But the porch, still dusty, half-painted, had never looked more like home. I stood there for a long time after, hands on my hips, sun on my face. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt like a father again. It started with a drawer. I was looking for extra sandpaper in the back cabinet of my workshop, but instead found a small wooden box. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were old screws, a faded tape measure, a tarnished locket, and beneath it all, a bundle of neatly folded letters. Some were mine, written to Helen while I worked out of state back in the '80s. Others were hers, never sent, probably never meant to be. She'd had a habit of writing out thoughts she couldn't say aloud. Letters to no one. Or maybe to God. Or maybe to him. There, among the yellowing paper, was one envelope with a name on the front. "For Ryan, when he's ready." My throat closed. It was in her handwriting. Delicate. Careful. A little slanted, like she was always in a bit of a rush but still trying to make it look beautiful. I sat down right there on the floor, dust floating around me, the box beside my feet. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. My sweet boy. If you're reading this, it means I'm not there to say it all in person. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you've made mistakes, or maybe you think you're alone. But I hope more than anything, that you're finally ready to hear me. Ryan, you were never hard to love. You were loud. You were stubborn. You pushed limits and asked too many questions. You had your father's eyes, and sometimes his temper, too. But not once, not for a second, did we stop loving you. I know your father was hard on you sometimes. I know you felt like you never measured up. But do you know what he told me the night you graduated? He said, I don't know how he turned out this good, but he did. That boy's got fire. He'll outrun us all. You didn't hear it, because men like him don't say things out loud often. But I did. And I kept it for you. And maybe one day, if you're older, wiser, and not so afraid of remembering who you are, you'll read this and realize. You weren't pushed away. You pulled back. You tried to become someone else. Someone the world respected. Someone tough. Someone who didn't cry at movies or laugh too loud or need his dad. But the truth is, you did need him. And that's okay. Because I need him, too. He's a good man, Ryan. And so are you. You just forgot. So if you find this, call him. Say what you mean. And for once, don't leave things unsaid. You're still our boy. Even now. Mom. I sat in the shed for almost an hour, holding that letter like a piece of something holy. I could still smell her perfume in the paper, that lavender she always kept in the hallway closet. When I finally stood up, I knew what I had to do. That evening, I called Ryan. He answered on the third ring. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? I found something, I said. He didn't speak, just waited. It's from your mother. For you. She wrote it before. Well, before. His voice dropped. You sure it's meant for me? It has your name on the front. Silence again. Then, do you want to read it to me? I hesitated. But then I sat down, unfolded the letter, and began. Word by word, sentence by sentence. I read it all. My voice cracked halfway through, and by the end, I was barely whispering. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Ryan exhaled, shakily. I wish I had that 10 years ago. You weren't ready 10 years ago, I said gently. Maybe now you are. There was a sniff on the other end. And then, she always knew. Yes, I whispered. She did. Thank you for keeping it. I didn't know I had, I said honestly. But I think she did. We didn't say anything for a while. But there was no need to. Because finally, in the space between memory and forgiveness, a mother's voice had built the bridge her son was too afraid to walk alone. And this time, he crossed it. It was a Tuesday. I was out in the garden, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel in one hand and a stubborn weed in the other, when I heard tires on gravel. Not many people came down this road without a reason. I stood slowly, brushing my knees off, squinting into the sunlight. Ryan's car. Emma in the passenger seat. But this time, the trunk was open, and it was full. Boxes, tools, paint cans, a folded-up step ladder. My heart slowed. They weren't just visiting. They were bringing something. Or maybe, bringing me back. Ryan stepped out, not in a rush, not with a speech. He simply opened the back door of the car, pulled out a rolled-up set of house plans. Old, yellowed, fraying at the edges. My plans. From my house. He handed them to me without a word. Emma walked around the side of the car, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She gave me one, and smiled. It needs work, she said. I looked at Ryan. He nodded. Everything needs work, he added quietly. But I figured, maybe we could do it together. I didn't answer. Not right away. Because I was staring past them, up the road, toward the place I used to live. The house I built with my own hands. The same one that once held Helen's laugh, Emma's first steps, and my son's silence. The house they'd kicked me out of. The house they had rewritten without me. And now they were asking me back. An hour later, we stood at the front of that house again. The paint had faded. The railing was loose. A cracked flower pot lay tipped under the windowsill. The porch light was dead. But it was still standing. And so was I. Ryan unlocked the door and let it swing open slowly. The air inside smelled like dust, old wood, and forgotten arguments. No one spoke. We just stood in the doorway, 3 people, 1 memory, and 1,000 things unsaid between us. Then Ryan turned to me and held out a set of keys. Not to live here, he said quickly. I mean, not unless you want to. But maybe just to help fix it. Paint. Build. Rebuild. He hesitated. Be in it again. The weight of the keys in my hand was heavier than I expected. Not because of the metal, but because of what they represented. I looked at Emma. She nodded. We want to fill it with better memories, she said. We want you in them. I stared at the worn floorboards, imagining them alive again, with boots thudding across them, hammers echoing against drywall, sawdust curling in the air like it used to. You kept the bench in the back? I asked. Emma grinned. I made Dad keep it. I laughed. That thing's older than he is. I know. That's why it creaks louder. Ryan smiled. We're thinking of repainting the kitchen. Blue, like Mom had it. That hit me hard. He hadn't said, Mom, in front of me in years. I'd like that, I said softly. And then, without fanfare, without ceremony, I walked inside. The light through the front windows was warmer than I remembered. Maybe because I wasn't carrying shame this time. I was carrying a second chance. We moved through the house slowly. Emma ran her fingers along the walls, naming rooms she barely remembered but wanted to reclaim. Ryan followed behind, pointing at pipes and corners and cracks in the ceiling. Not blaming. Just noticing. And for the first time in a long, long time, I saw him not as the man who broke me, but as the boy who still wanted to build something with me. Even if it took time. Even if we had to start from ruin. That evening, we sat on the back porch, the 3 of us. Emma handed me a sandwich she made herself, too much mustard, bread already soggy. I ate every bite. Ryan took out a notepad, sketched a few measurements, scratched out lines, rewrote them. At one point, he held it out. Too many windows, he asked. I looked at the page. Not enough. We laughed. Emma rested her head on my shoulder. And in that small, quiet moment, with nothing extraordinary happening except everything, I realized. We weren't fixing the house. We were rebuilding family. 1 nail at a time. It's quiet now. Not the kind of silence that presses on your chest, like the one I used to feel in the shed, in those bitter days after Ryan sent me out. This silence is lighter. Like a blanket, not a cage. I wake early. Coffee before dawn. Birds before thought. I sit on the back porch, the same one we sanded together, and listen to the wind through the trees. Sometimes, I hear Emma's laughter echo from a memory. Sometimes, I hear nothing at all. And both are enough. The house is almost finished. Fresh paint. Repaired steps. New railing. Ryan and I still argue about tools. He buys the cheap kind, I don't let him use them. Emma rolls her eyes and makes us sandwiches we never finish because we talk too much. He calls me Dad now. Not often. But when he does, it's quiet. Like he's trying it on. Like it's a name he's slowly remembering belongs to both of us. We don't rehash the past. Not much. The worst things, we let stay buried. Not because we're pretending they didn't happen, but because digging them up would only make us bleed again. And we've done enough bleeding. One day, Ryan found the old photograph, me and Helen, sitting on the front steps, her head on my shoulder, my eyes half closed. He showed it to Emma. She looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "I want that." At first I thought she meant love. Then I realized she meant peace. Last week, I stood in the living room alone. Light spilled across the floor like liquid gold. The walls smelled like new paint and old memories. The kind that don't sting anymore. I walked to the kitchen, where Ryan had painted a wall bright blue. Helen's blue. I ran my hand along it slowly. She would have liked it. She would have told me to cry less and laugh more. To forgive faster, not because people deserve it, but because I deserve the space. Her letter to Ryan stays in a drawer by my bed now. He has a copy. But I kept the original. Some nights, I reread it. Not because I need to, but because it reminds me that even in absence, love can guide hands, soften hearts, and stitch together what we thought was torn forever. Emma once asked me, "Do you think people ever really change?" I said, "No. But I think they remember who they were meant to be." She smiled at that. Sometimes I wonder what she'll tell her children, if she chooses to have any. Will she talk about the Christmas Ryan kicked me out? Will she mention the shed? Or will she say something else? Something like, "There was a man who forgave my dad before he asked to be forgiven. He built more than houses. He rebuilt us." One afternoon, I stood outside the house alone. The air was cool. A soft wind was moving through the trees like whispers. I closed my eyes. I thought of Helen. Of the boy Ryan was. Of the man he became. Of the pain, the quiet, the noise. Of the moment they pushed me out. And then, of the moment they invited me back in. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Not the loud kind, but the kind that settles like peace in the bones. I've learned this. We don't always get the apology we deserve. We don't always hear the words we needed when we needed them. But sometimes, if we keep our hearts open just long enough, we get something else. We get change. We get love, reshaped. We get home, not returned to us, but rebuilt with us. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. It helps others find these powerful moments of justice, redemption, and truth. Let us know in the comments, what part of Edward's journey stayed with you? Don't stop here. Explore our other stories. Each one reveals the quiet strength that rises when everything falls apart. Subscribe and turn on notifications. At When Karma Strikes, every week brings a new story worth hearing and remembering.